$15 billion of assets under their management, 43,138 homes, 15 key markets. This is a company we're going to be talking about today. And a lot of people have been feeling the pain of purchasing a house this year, perhaps even last year. And it's been very difficult. And a lot of people hear about these corporate cash buyers and, they don't really realize they're true until they start looking. I recently made a video talking about it and doing some deeper dives into specific areas where I am and discovering there's actually a big presence of people buying cash, not really giving a chance to the everyday home buyer to buy these houses. And I promised I would look into these companies further. And this is my first video following through on that promise. Everything I discuss in this video is completely public information. Everything shared in this video can be found easily with a Google search. And I also want to specify to everybody out there that although you may agree or disagree with the tactics or the philosophies or what is happening right now, everything being done is completely legal. We live in a capitalist society where those who come up with good ideas and have the funds to provide those ideas make good money. And unfortunately, that's where we are. So once again, the ethics at this point of what's happening, you can agree or disagree with it, but there is no wrongdoing being done here. So I want to make sure I get those 2 points across first. Now, let's talk about that subject at hand. In this video, we're speaking about Progress Residential, and how I discovered them is pretty interesting. I did the video where I was doing research on different kind of companies and different purchases happening, and I discovered this company being one of them. By following the thread more, I found out there was a listing agent that's been helping them, and looking past through his records, I discovered, well, this person has been helping this company for a bit. So the company in question, through the tax records I discovered, is called Progress Phoenix, and I'll show you in a little bit how I discovered that. So how I found this information is simply using good old Google. So your county or your city should have some kind of assessor's office. Here, I happen to live in Maricopa County, so what I use is the Maricopa County's assessor's website. So I went here. Sorry, that was my ringtone. Sorry if it caught it. And here you can look up the addresses. So here, as you can tell already, I had already searched it, Progress Phoenix. And here is where I discovered the shocking truth. Our editor's going to do a good job of blurring out all the addresses because we don't want to leak out any private information. But here we can discover that there's 1,300 results just under Progress Phoenix. However, one thing I discovered is Progress Phoenix is just one of the companies. If I did a little more digging, which I did, I could also look up Progress Residential. And that itself has 3,200 results. Well, Javier, how do you know it's the same company? Well, actually, I can click on the ownership. Once again, this is all public information. Sorry, let me click on the APN instead. Boom. We can find out the owner's information, and we see the address is P.O. Box 4090, Scottsdale, Arizona, 85261. Well, if I go back to the Progress Phoenix, click on one of their properties, and I see the owner's information right here. Even though it's two separate different LLC names, there are different branches they take. I'm sure this is for tax purposes. That's something that my brain cannot understand because I'm a big old dummy, but they don't use one name of one company over and over again. So if you're having a hard time finding, just try different variations. But in this case, it specifically ties to Progress. So yeah, Progress Phoenix essentially is a subname, if you will, of Progress Residential. And looking up Progress Residential led to even more properties, like 3,000 to 4,000, I believe, if I remember correctly. So this is a company that's been in the game and is doing it at a very high level. In fact, I think they were the biggest that I discovered when searching these other companies. And trust me, those other companies will also be researched. So just stay tuned, make sure to subscribe, like, do all those things. Sorry, I'm a YouTuber, I gotta plug myself. You can't blame me, it's the game. Don't hate the player, it's the game. So this confirms for sure that Progress Phoenix is Progress Residential. Before I just start researching the company a little further, I kind of just want to verify the tactics being used, right? So we all know at this point, well, that these cash buyers are coming in and offering an absurd amount. And when, let's say there's a house for 320, you go make an offer on it, even if you want to be competitive at 330, 340, there's always a cash buyer that seems to beat you that's offering more than you are. And you're just wondering, what the heck, man? Am I crazy here? What's going on? Well, I wanted to verify if this is happening with Progress as well, or maybe it was an exception. So here's what I found out. So in going through these properties that they bought, it's interesting. Yes, they're doing the standard corporate cash buyer thing of looking at active properties that are for sale and offering a huge amount, which I'll show you some examples of. But what I'm also noticing is they're buying directly from companies that maybe bought something and not really sure what they got themselves into, or, I'm not really sure. And what's interesting about these corporate sales is they're not on the MLS. You can't find them. So there's no proof that they're doing, like overbidding people. So here's an example I found for you. There's this property in Surprise, a really nice property. And it, it was bought like years ago. And by looking at the tax records, I discovered that it was purchased by Open Door, then sold to Progress Phoenix LLC for the same price that Open Door bought it for. Now, if you're not familiar with Open Door, I just made a video talking about how Zillow is manipulating the housing market, but really not doing it. It's more or less a bunch of companies that have done it for a while, but then before then wholesalers are doing it forever. So watch that video after this video so you can get a good idea. But anyways, the point is, they're buying them through corporations as well. Now, looking at the other normal ones, now by normal, I don't mean normal, but I mean they actually were property for sale. We have a good example here of one listed at $250. Sold for $267 cash, offered $17,000 cash above list, of course, giving the buyers no chance of competing to get that one. Here's another example of Open Door buying the property from somebody for $15 and then selling it, or wholesaling it, if you will, to Progress Phoenix for $430. How do I know this is Open Door? Well, by looking at the tax records, I can see the selling agent was from Open Door Brokerage. Another example of this, listed at $349, sold for $369 for cash, killing the competition. So we're noticing two things here. Their main approach tends to be either going towards these properties that seem like they have great potential and they're overbidding $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 over the value, or not over the value, but over the list price, and basically killing the competition for any home buyer out there. And two, they seem to be leveraging these other companies that are already buying properties on a massive scale, and to either help them with their inventory or perhaps giving them wholesale opportunities, they buy it directly from them, therefore not even having it be listed on the market. There's a paper trail per the taxes, but no one's really looking up the tax information other than this crazy guy right here. So we've identified that not only are they using the tactics of offering above for these cash buyers, and there might be some where they didn't, but either way, most of them, or at least some part of them, are being done this way. But we also discovered that they're actually working with these other companies like Open Door, verified through tax records, where Open Door will be the public, one to go out there and, buy the properties from people. And once again, the video I made about it is going to be somewhere here if you want to watch that. But then they use that, and Open Door either gives it to them to wholesale it to them for a small profit, or perhaps they bought an asset that they don't want to sell, they'll give it to this company, right? So what is the purpose of these properties? Well, most of them, per the tax records, the intention of it is to be a rental. And they are definitely a rental. Maybe not the last 1 month or two of them, but 3 or 4 months back, if you look at the sales and you compare it, do a quick Google search, you do discover that they are rented out. And I want to say they are rented out for a pretty penny. We're talking at least, near 2,000 and plus. So at this point, we don't know if the intention is for them to just, start this rental empire, or they're simply just buying a bunch of property for the purpose of holding onto them longer. So what must be done at this point is to further research what this company is. So we have an idea of what the name of the company is, what the address is. Now let's do some deep Google searching to find out who is behind it. So if I continue to follow the paper trail, not starting with Progress Phoenix, but starting with Progress Residential, I can look up the actual property address for the public, what's their essentially their address per the public record. Looking up the tax info, once again, I can find it here. This is not me using a website I can have access to or anything. Literally, you saw me just Google it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type this into Google, move my big head out of the way so you guys can see. This kind of a spoiler alert here. I already did the research, but essentially, using this website here, sunbiz.org, I can further look more into the public information on it, and I can see that the authorized person for this LLC is Progress Residential Holdings LLC. Another thing to Google, to go down further the rabbit hole, and we trail it down to Progress Residential. Progress Residential, I mean, it has the same name, so we're not going to simply assume it's the same company. So looking at it right now, it looks like simply it is just a massive rental company. Areas we serve, this serves all these kind of cities, southeast, southwest, leasing properties everywhere. But once again, we don't want to just simply assume, and the addresses they have here on record do not match with any of the addresses we've seen on the tax records or anything. So what can we do to tie these companies together? Well, here's what I'm going to do. Let's find an old purchase they made maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and let's find the rental listing, because remember, most of these are being turned into rentals. Pretty expensive rentals, by the way, but let's do that. See if we get any luck. What's interesting is a lot of these properties that they bought 1 or 2 months ago aren't even for rent yet. I don't know if they're preparing them or what are they doing exactly, but I might have to go pretty deep back there to see if I can find something that's for rent already. Or perhaps they rent it within their own personal system, so they don't actually have to list it for rent. They just already have applicants that are ready to rent it out, and it never gets, publicized on Zillow, for rent or anything along those lines. Technically, if they do have a database of leasees, they don't have to make it public that it's a rental. They just, per the taxes, it's a rental purpose for a purpose for rental, but there's no proof of that. So I found one. We can tell this is a property owned by Progress Phoenix. Everything should be blurred out except this, St. Katari Drive. We can see the owner is Progress Phoenix. And by Googling this property, we narrow it down to it being a rental, currently for rent, by Progress Residential. And if we visit their website, it ties us back into the same website that we found. So it seems to be tied back to Progress Residential. And once again, it's the same name. Well, in real estate, people use the same name like consistently. If you think I'm kidding, look up literally any real estate agent team logo. It's a house with a key or a key in the house or some windows. I'm sure the editor put up a bunch of them now. So there's a lot of constant things. So I needed to verify they were actually tied together, which I think I did a pretty good job at tying them together. Well, you know for sure at this point that Progress Residential, this giant rental company, is tied to these properties that are being bought cash at a high level. So who is running Progress Residential? If you literally look up Progress Residential owner, the first link gives you all the information you need. There's actually a podcast, A Leading Voice in Real Estate with Matt Slepin. Shout out to you. If you end up watching this video, please let me know. But it seems like he's doing more podcasts with the people at the top, like with these kinds of people. So not necessarily people looking out for homeowners like myself. So here we have, quite frankly, the thing that busted all open, right? Chaz Mueller literally interviews the CEO of Progress Residential and Dana Hamilton, head of real estate at Pretium. Pretium? What is Pretium? Pretium is a specialized investment manager with $22.3 billion in assets under management, focused on real estate, mortgage, finance, and corporate debt. And they're not embarrassed or shy about, sharing this information. If you go to pretium.com/residential, their information is completely open here. If you go to pretium.com/residential, it tells you here they own $15 billion of assets, 43,000 homes, 15 key markets, and a 97% occupancy rate. They have a lot of good, information here about what they're about, and they're not, hiding it or anything. They even have a good article about the U.S. housing. It's a really good article. I definitely recommend it so you can see what they're thinking at least. But according to them, we expect this mini boom will begin to decelerate as the pandemic panic for home buying begins to normalize. We may even see a modest dip in demand as we discover how much the surge of sales, 2020 sales, was partly a pull for forward future sales. As we have argued here, we believe that the recent momentum in the housing markets will most likely extend through at least the first half of 2021, if not longer. We expect the mini boom will begin to decelerate as the pandemic panic for home buying begins to normalize. That is where all the data that I shared with you at the beginning of the video is at. So we have officially tied one of these big companies buying cash properties to this specific, like a hedge fund or asset fund, whatever the proper term is here. I'll leave it up to you. What I find interesting is in the first 10 to 15 minute conversation in this podcast, it really tells you everything about these companies' mindset. We have been speculating that the intentions of these companies, these cash buyers, are like nefarious reasons of like completely making someone said America a rental empire, right? So that way you don't own your home. Well, we're not in conspiracy la land here. We're here to defend and try to talk about why home ownership has become so difficult difficult for the everyday first-time home buyer. And the reason is partly because a lot of these corporate cash buyers are once again warping the brains of sellers to expect higher price cash offers, and also warping the brains of buyers to expect them to be competing with these cash offers that are going way above value by offering an exorbitant amount of properties. So this is what we're here to talk to. We're not here to talk about conspiracy la la land, but this company was founded by a gentleman who, during the real estate housing, crash of 2010, 2015, realized that millennials were having trouble with their credit. They saw this huge, essentially wave of millennials coming that are going to have families they expected or maybe anticipated them to not have the credit needed or essentially the finances needed to be able to buy a home. So they purchased properties to satisfy that need by giving them rentals. This is not a conspiracy. It is literally said by the head of real estate of Pretium. Sorry, I'm not saying the name correctly, but anyways, here's her saying this exactly.
Question before Chaz comes in. When Don Mullen thought about this thing as someone who came from Goldman Sachs, did he see this as a long-term business or a trade?
He was more on the long-term side of it. And the reason is that he saw a dislocation in the space. So he was less about seeing inexpensive real estate, which is what parties like Blackstone did. Instead, what he saw was that there had been significant underbuilding during the crisis, that there was this wave of millennials who at some point were going to form households, and that they didn't have great credit, and that it was going to be more difficult for them to borrow in the future. And therefore, he basically saw a generation coming and said, how are we going to house them? They're not going to be able to buy. They're going to need to rent. So that was the intersection of demand and supply and really his insight here. And I think he hoped that if he built this properly, it would become a long-term, incredibly scalable business.
These are high-level key players that know what they're doing. We're not dealing with scrubs with daddy's money here. We're talking, multi-billion level, really extremely geniuses, if I will, of finance that are dealing with this. They saw this coming. They saw this huge wave of millennials with families that were going to buy a home. But here's the problem. Here's the beautiful problem of it all, is they were wrong. They were wrong. There are plenty of millennials that are able to buy a home. Perhaps they didn't foresee the low down payment programs being available. Perhaps they did not foresee educational channels like mine and Kyle, Win the House You Love, helping people and empowering them to take the ability to own their home. Regardless of the situation, they started 2012. So they were buying properties, I'm sure. But really what happened, it was the perfect storm. COVID hits. Low interest rates hit, panic sets in, whatever the case may be. This was a perfect opportunity for them to seize a lot of properties. They were around, I'm sure, but I didn't hear about them that much before 2020. I don't know what the purpose was of turning all of their purchasing power to like 10 or whatever, a lot higher, maybe not 10, hopefully not 10. But they saw the COVID situation and just went crazy. Started buying properties left and right. And now, in essence, once again, they're not responsible for it. And if you don't believe me, if you're somehow working for them or you're watching this video in defense of them, look in the comment section and here's people's story of how they're able to qualify, but they can't buy a home anymore because of the expectations set by buying these properties at a high level cash. So yes, they're buying these properties for the purpose of providing homes to fill in the demand of people not being able to buy homes. But I mean, geez Louise, once again, this is not fact. This is just me kind of speculating here. It wasn't a situation where people needed to rent. It was not hard to buy a home. Are they making it harder for people to buy so that way they have to rent? Is that what's happening here? Like, they're like, okay, we need to make it harder to buy, so now they have to rent? Because maybe the future they envisioned is happening now, but it didn't happen naturally. It happened because of their intervention. If they would have left things alone, let's say even if COVID hit, all that happened. COVID hit, low interest rates, people bought, right? There was a huge surge, but eventually kind of slowed down towards the end of the year, right? But what really made things difficult for people is the cash buyers. when we're not getting out of the pandemic, but when the pandemic started, people were buying like mid 2020. We were like competing with people that are like, oh man, they offered $20,000 more, but they got their closing costs. That's what we were competing with. We weren't competing with like crazy cash at that point, but people were forced to have to waive their appraisals and do all kinds of things because the cash buyers started stepping out. Unfortunately, not a satisfactory conclusion to this. We have determined that there is this specific company who is purchasing with the intention of turning them into rentals for the investors. I'm not sure if their long-term plan is. They do say that they're long-term investors. They said in this podcast of theirs, which I implore you to go listen to. And there you have it, folks. If you're upset, it's a capitalist society. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not doing anything illegal. Per their understanding, they're expecting things to cool off with the pandemic pressure. So when things calm down, they will go back to their cash buying ways of buying things at list or below list. That way it makes the playing field a little, heavy. So I don't blame them. This is genius. This is absolutely genius for them to predict the huge amount of people that are going to need to find somewhere to rent. People were being able to buy. There was not a home buying problem that they did not predict. And they, in essence, created the problem that they foresaw by all these cash buyers coming in and including themselves. And now this is exactly what they planned. They exactly were foreseeing a difficult market for people to buy in. So they were being forced to rent. And that's exactly what the position they put themselves in. I can't hate it. It's smart. But man, it freaking sucks that people can't buy a house right now. People are able to buy. They're qualified, they're willing, and they're able. They even have their down payment and closing cost. But no, you can't buy right now because the corporations need to get their money first. Then you guys can get your money. What do you guys think? I'm open for discussions here. I'm done.